making this bread. Let me see. And I apologize, I am not on my computer. I'm on my husband's computer, so I could have some computer fun with this too. So we'll make sure everything goes along. But this comes from a book that I actually got several years ago. And the book is, and there's a picture of it there, The New Artisan Bread in 5 Minutes a Day. And it is making it in 5 minutes a day. That doesn't include letting it set, letting it rise, and letting it cook. But it just does take 5 minutes to put it together once you've made it originally. And this is a really great book. This book is available in the library. I really recommend, if you're interested in doing this, that you get a hold of it. There are other books that are on the market, and there's also recipes that are online. One of the things I like about this book is that there's so many different recipes that are included in here. And there's recipes in here on making pizza dough, gluten-free dough, sandwich bread, using different flours, making loaves, different kinds of loaves. So you can really have a lot of fun with it. So with that said, we're going to just jump into it. And this should only take about 30 minutes or so. So some of the ingredients that you need to have on hand are in that first picture there. And I do use the King Arthur flour, is just one that I like. It's an all-purpose flour. You can really use any type of flour, all-purpose flour that you like. Kosher salt, you're going to need water. Yeast is in the middle, and then the cornmeal is actually for lining either the pizza peel or for your parchment paper. So you need to have a little bit of that on hand. And in the middle picture, you see a picture of my pizza peel. You don't have to have one, but it's kind of nice to have on hand. It's a lot of fun. And then over on the right is my baking stone. And as you can see, I have used it quite a bit. But the baking stone is something that, in addition to making the bread, it's nice to have on hand. You can put pizzas on it. You can bake rolls on it. So there's multiple uses for it. But I really, once I got it, I think it's one of the best things to have in the kitchen. So then getting ready. So I have some mixing bowls. I have my whisk. And if you look on the left side there, you can see next to the whisk is my dough hook. And so you don't have to have one. You can use a spoon. It's perfectly fine. I like having it. I find that when I'm first mixing the dough, it's really helpful. It wasn't real expensive. I got it off of Amazon. Behind that is the canister that is a food safe canister that I got also off of Amazon. And again, I think it was like $10, $15 to get one. And I'll explain a little bit more later on why it's really handy to have it. The next picture over, I've got my measuring spoons. I've got a spoon in case I need to change how much is going into my ingredients. And then I have a scale. And I really recommend getting an electronic scale. And again, we'll talk about it a little bit more going forward. But you get a lot more accuracy, and it's not just that, you get a lot of consistency with making your dough if you are actually weighing out how much your ingredients are, instead of trying to scoop a tablespoon or scoop a cup of flour. On the top there, next to the baking stone, is my pan that actually, once everything goes into the oven, you put hot water in it, and I'll explain that a little bit more, but you want to have a metal pan. This is just a broiler pan that actually was in the bottom of my oven. So when we moved into the house, it wasn't even mine. But you don't want a glass pan. You need to have a metal pan of some sort. Now, if you don't have a baking stone, you can always use a Dutch oven, and you can put your bread inside of that, and then you actually put the lid on it. The parchment paper would be for putting your dough on top of the parchment paper, setting it inside the pot, And then it makes it easier for when it's done, as far as taking it out, you can just grab the parchment paper. If you don't have a baking stone, you could also use a cookie sheet. And again, what you would want to do is put your parchment paper down, put some of the cornmeal onto that, and put your bread on it, that when you see it later on. So don't feel intimidated by, I've got to go out and get all of these different things. These are nice to have. You don't have to have a scale. You don't have to have a baking stone. You can just use a cookie sheet and you can make do with that. Okay. So what I'm doing here, and I don't know how easily you can see it, is I'm getting started with my ingredients. And the first thing that goes into my pan here, my container, is actually the water. And it's 3 cups of water, which is also, I'm looking here, I'm cheating, 680 grams. And when you use the electronic scale, actually has, whether you can use ounces or whether you can use grams. I use grams. And the nice thing about it too is that once you put your container on there, you can actually zero it out. So if you're putting in 680 grams of water, you don't have to keep adding up how much is going in. You can zero it out every time you're adding another ingredient. So I have warm water. You don't want the water too warm because that will kill your yeast. You're actually better off making your water a little bit cool. If you had to, it means you would have to let it rise longer, but that's better than killing the yeast off. But you want it just slightly, I think it says 100 degrees, just, you know, it's tap water, but you just don't want it too warm. So you put in, let's see, 10 grams of granulated yeast, which is also 1 tablespoon. So I'm just kind of leaning over because we turned it around for photography purposes, but I'm trying to see how much I'm adding in on the scale there. And then you put in your salt. So the salt that goes in is 1 to 1.5 tablespoons, and that's 17 to 25 grams. And this is all in the book, but, and I put in about 20 grams. It's not, you want some salt in there, but it's not necessary to, you know, do the full amount if you don't want to. Okay. So what I do then, once it's all in there, is I take my whisk and I just take a minute or two is all that's needed to just kind of get that all mixed together, get the yeast and the salt and the water all done. And that's all I'm doing there. Okay. So this is the fun part. Go watch the video, talk while it's going. I think that I enjoy making this bread because there's probably a little bit of a kid in me that I just get the fun in pouring that all onto the water, not having to do all of the measuring with the, you know, scooping in my measuring cup and then leveling it off. I can just sit there and pour it in. And then again, I'm checking to see how far am I going there. And if you could hear the audio, you would hear my sister Kathy going, nope, keep going. You're almost there. Just add a little bit more. So she was helping me out a little bit looking at the amount. If you add too much, that's where that great spoon comes in. Just kind of scoop out the top there and, you know, but you really want consistency. It makes a difference. If it is, when you put your flour in, it's 910 grams, which is 6.5 cups of flour. And if you think about it, if you bake and you have different recipes, sometimes they'll tell you add an extra tablespoon or 2 of flour to a recipe. So getting that consistency every time of having 910 grams, I think is helpful. And it really has helped me in my bread making. So here I get to dive in with my dough hook, which I enjoy. I think this is a little bit why people like to garden, because they get to go out and put their hands into the dirt. And with this, you really just get to go in there and scoop that dough up. And all you're really trying to achieve here is getting it thoroughly mixed. You want to kind of scrape the sides, scrape the bottom, get the last bits of flour out of it. And it just ends up being a shaggy dough that you end up with. You can kind of see there. And that's all you have to do. Just get it mixed. Okay. So what I'm showing you here is that now that I've mixed it, and you can see this is just a really shaggy dough. It doesn't look like much of anything. Just about have the 2 liters here. And when it is done rising, it is actually going to go all the way up to 4 liters, or just about to 4 liters. Now, this is why I like having this container. You, if you put it into a bowl, or if you put it into another kind of vessel, which you can do, it's more difficult to see how far it has risen. So for instance, being wintertime, my house is cold. So it takes a little bit longer for it to rise than it does in the summer. So it really makes a difference being able to visually see, okay, it's come up to that 4 liter mark, or just almost to the 4 liter mark. So I know it's come up enough. It's doubled in size. And on a quick note here, I also want to mention, you don't have to make this full batch. You can take this recipe and cut it in half if you want to, because this does make 3 to 4 loaves of bread. But I'll explain to you why making a full batch is so handy. So what you do then is you take the lid, you set it on top loosely, do not snap it down. You'll notice I've got just a little bit of room there for the air to get out. And then I just try to find the warmest spot that I can in my kitchen that's away from the drafts. And you just set it there and you forget about it. Now, it can take about 2 hours for it to rise. And that's because you're not kneading it. So I just tell Alexa, tell me when 2 hours is up, because that's my timer now that I'm using. But whatever timer you have, set it for 2 hours and come back and take a look at it. You can go do whatever you need to do. And if it sits there longer than that, it's actually fine. You don't want it to sit too long, maybe an extra half hour to an hour before you need to put it in the fridge. Okay. So this is it after it has been sitting there, and you can see it where it's come to. It's just kind of crazy. It has risen and gotten there all on its own. You didn't have to knead anything or, you know, turn it over in the bowl. Not that I don't enjoy making knead bread, but sometimes it's just a lot more work intensive, where this is quick and easy to make. There is a waiting time involved, but it's just so much easier to go about and get other things done. So now I'm getting ready to shape the actual ball, and they spell that B-O-U-L-E, but I think it's pronounced ball. And what I do is I take one of my mixing bowls and I dump some flour into it, because that's what's going to go onto my hands, where I'm going to dive in and pull out some of this dough. And I will say that it's a lot easier to take your dough and put it in the refrigerator and use it the next day, because it's a little easier to work with. It's a little bit easier to shape. So I'm going to show you here in a minute the video of me working with the dough. You can do it as soon as it's risen. It's just a little bit stickier to handle. That's the only difference. Okay. So I'm taking the cornmeal and putting it over my pizza peel. Again, if you don't have a pizza peel, you would just be doing this on top of parchment paper. Now, the reason I do it this way is because I found that you're taking wet dough and you're putting it on top of the cornmeal. And later you're going to be sliding it into the oven. And if you have bare spots on your peel when you go to slide it, it catches. Now, you'll end up with some very creative and interesting looking bread, because I sometimes even had the bread twist on itself, which still puffed up and actually looked fantastic when it was done. But it's a lot easier when you put it in for it to slide off, and you'll be seeing that a little bit later. So then I'm getting started. And so I've scooped a little bit of that flour out of the other bowl, and I'm putting it on top, and that just makes it easier for me to grab. And then I'm putting it on my hands and hoping for the best here, because I'm just going to dive into it. And you just go in and grab. I've never measured it out. I guess you could, but I just grab a handful, about what I think I'm going to need. And then you take the scissors and cut away the rest of it. And once this dough has sat and rested in the container, it actually will all smooth back out again. It's really interesting. Now you can see, because the dough was not in the refrigerator, it just came right off of the countertop. It is a little bit sticky. Now, what I'm doing here is called cloaking the bread, and it's called a gluten cloak. And you're just turning it slightly and grabbing the edges of it. And you can see I'm shaking it a little bit, just kind of stretch it and get it underneath. And that's it. You handle it a minute to 2 minutes, that's it. And if you see that, there, I made the ball and it goes onto the cornmeal. And then you need to cover it. Now, I have found what works for me. I take that bowl and I put it on top, and that provides a good cover. If you are going to take, say, saran wrap or something of that sort, you need to take some Pam and actually spray the saran wrap so that it doesn't stick to the dough. You don't want to put anything like a wet cloth on it, or a lot of times when you're doing yeast type dough, you have it in the bowl and you're kind of putting a towel over the top. That's a little bit heavy for this. It doesn't seem to work very well, and you definitely wouldn't want that on the dough itself. So I found that that bowl works good, but you need to have it covered, or else it just kind of gets a very tough exterior onto the bread itself. Okay, so you want to let it rest on the counter for 90 minutes. Now, you can let it rest for as little as 30 minutes. I prefer a longer rise because I like more air pockets in it. So the longer you let it sit, to me, then you get a better rise. What I do is I set my timer for 45 minutes, and when 45 minutes is up, then I go over. And as you can see, I'm getting my baking stone and I'm putting that in on the top rack, and that is in the middle of my oven. And then pulling out the rack underneath, and I'm taking that metal baking pan, broiler pan, and I'm putting it on that second rack. And what's going to happen is, well, you set the oven, and the oven sets for, I think it's 450. I'm sorry, I have to go peek over here. You would think after all the times of making it, I would remember, but I'm always going back and looking again. It's 450. Ah, there, right there. So anyways, you let it sit in there, and with the baking stone, it takes a while to preheat. So she recommends 30 minutes. I let it go for 45 just to make sure that the baking stone's nice and hot. So we're good. Okay. Now I take the cover off of the bread, and we're going to dust the top of it. Again, I just find it easier to use a sifter, so you just get a little light dusting on top. And then I've got that handy little tool, and something else I also bought off of Amazon, and that's actually a razor blade, so you have to be careful. And you're going to score the top of the bread. Again, you don't have to have this fancy tool. Wasn't real expensive. I like having it. It makes it easier. But if you have a sharp knife, you could just take a knife and you could go across. So, you know, don't feel like you have to have all. And that was amazing that it actually came off of the peel and didn't stick, because normally it does. So I'm very proud of it. Now I'm taking a cup of hot water and putting it in the bottom one and closing the oven up. And that water is then steams inside the oven and just gives it a really good bake. And that hot water is just hot water from the tap. It's not anything that I boiled or done anything of that sort. And you want to be careful, because when you pour it into that pan, you do get steam that comes back up. So, you know, don't have small children nearby. You give yourself some room and just be aware, because it is going to hit that hot metal pan and it's going to give a release of steam. So be back from it a little bit when you do that. Okay, and this was after 35 minutes of cooking. And I just use a pizza peel to go back in there and grab it and bring it out. Now you want it to sit on a cooling rack for an hour to 2 hours. Now this is me here taking the dough that's left over and putting it in my fridge and saving it for next time. So a couple things on, you want to let it cool for a couple of hours, because it is actually still cooking. If you cut into it too soon, then you your bread's a little bit heavier, and I really have noticed a difference. But the smell of the fresh bread, and if I'm hungry, I just don't wait a lot of times. It's just too tempting. So I actually, this was one of the occasions where I went ahead and sliced off a piece of bread and had some soft butter nearby and slapped some butter on it and went ahead and ate it. If I let it sit a little bit longer, I don't know, it might have gotten a little bit more airy than it is. I also, this time, because we were under some time constraints, I didn't let it sit the full 90 minutes. I only did about 45 minutes and then put it into the oven. But you can see it looks beautiful, and I'll tell you, it tastes absolutely amazing. And it will stay fresh 3 to 5 days. Just kind of keep an eye on it. It doesn't have preservatives in it. The only things that are in it is the flour, the salt, then the yeast, and the water. So it's so healthy for you compared to, you know, take a loaf of bread and take a look at it and see everything that you're eating. After a day or so, I like taking slices and putting them into the toaster and eating it that way. Especially nice to do it that way at breakfast time, putting a little bit of jam on it. It's really good. But as you're looking at this rustic loaf, I want to also say that you can take your dough and you can shape it and put it into a loaf pan and actually come up with a sandwich loaf. And I think, Kathy, I'll put you on the spot. I gave you some dough to take home.
Yeah, that bin that was in the refrigerator. I took
Yes.
it. I took about half of it. I didn't have the flour to put the cloak on, so it did look a little bit more rough when I put it into the pan. But I just sprayed it with Pam, the loaf pan, and then I didn't have a broiler pan. I put it in my toaster oven, and it turned out beautifully. So it is, you know, but it doesn't have the artisan look.
Right.
So it's a little different. It's much more dense than this one is when I did it that way.
And I will say there have been plenty of times that been halfway through baking the bread and gone, darn it, I forgot to put the water in. Or darn it, I forgot to score the top of the bread. So none of those things are tragic in any way, because I try to even set that stuff up there. And if you had been there when Kathy was taking the pictures, Kathy said, are you going to put the water in the oven? And I went, oh yeah. And I quick grabbed the measuring cup to do that. So sometimes you get distracted and you forget, you'll still end up with a delicious loaf of bread. It just can be a little bit different.
Well,
And that,
the other thing is I took a piece of, I was hungry, so I took a piece of it and flattened it out. Didn't have it rest or anything. And I put it in a fry pan just to see if I could make it kind of a, I don't know, not a pancake. Pita or something. I don't know what I was trying to do, but it was delicious. It was absolutely delicious.
yeah,
It's very
it's,
flexible, very flexible.
it is very flexible. And I think the whole thing is that it's fun. And one of the things when I was first making it, I found that my initial loaves came out a lot flatter. And I ended up making what really looked like ciabatta bread, bread that's like yay high. I think it was because I was overworking the dough when I was cloaking it, and you want to be careful. But in the book, she has a whole section on if you're having a problem with certain things, you can look and see, and she will go through it and say, try this instead. So it's really kind of foolproof. But even with it being a loaf that didn't get a good rise on it, it was delicious. So, it's really so easy. And I've never had one that didn't turn out good. They don't all come out looking spectacular, but they all taste absolutely delicious. And I think that's it. I really ran through this pretty quick. Hopefully didn't leave anybody behind. But I want to remind people that in the book, which is available in the library, that you can use, she has recipes for using different flours, different grains, making all kinds of different things. You can make rolls with it, which I have done. I have made the rolls, and it came out really well. I made about 10 rolls, and we froze some, and they reheated really, really nice. We just brought them out and actually popped them in the microwave. You want the front of the book again? I saw that pop up. I think Sharon's going to go back to the front of it too. Let's see. There we go. Perfect. And there are other books out there, but I really love this book. And the doctor that's on the front there, Dr. Hertzberg, is really the first one who came up with this and started creating a no-knead bread. And then Zoe Francois, who is a baker, then collaborated with him for them to kind of finesse this recipe and then take it from there. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to share on it. I made some notes and stuff, but I think that's it. Just going back over a few things again, don't worry about having all the tools. Don't worry about, not having a baking stone or something of that sort. You don't need to have that. You can try making the bread a few times and see if it's something that you want to invest in, but have fun with it. Enjoy it. It's something that you can do with kids if you have children, because it's easy for them, to get up there and mix things. So, anybody have any questions? Anything you want me to run back over again? We didn't do too bad, about 30 minutes. I didn't post the recipe, but I can.
I think that's an answer to Sharon's question about other classes.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, the baking cooking classes.
Yeah,
But I think that I have given the recipe to people, but what I found is that without the directions, they got a little bit lost. But now that you've seen the show, you should be fine.
Maggie, what we could do is send the recipe out and also the reference to the book to everybody who signed up. And
Perfect.
and I have been recording this, so hopefully we'll be able to put it on the library YouTube channel also. So if somebody missed the presentation, or if you want to go back through it and say, I'm at this step, what did Maggie do at that point? Please visit the library YouTube channel also. So that would be great.
Okay.
I thought that was absolutely fantastic. It makes me want to try to do some baking again after a long time, even though I don't need to eat bread, but my goodness, that looks absolutely delicious.
And there are some recipes in there that she puts egg into, and there's some recipes that she puts a little bit of milk into, because there's some sweetbreads that she does. One thing I will mention that I've forgotten to mention before is the container. If you only use it for just the yeast and the water and the flour and salt and nothing else, when you get done taking the last of the bread out, you don't have to clean the container. You actually can then mix your next batch of bread in there. And when you've done that, over time, you kind of get a sourdough taste to your bread, if that's something that you would like. Now, if you have any kind of egg or dairy that you have put into the dough, which some of the recipes do have, you have to wash it.
Yeah.
But just using those ingredients, you can make a new batch, and you do get, I've been doing it, and you do get kind of a sourdough taste.
Oh, that's fantastic. You are quite the baker. I am so impressed.
Thank you,
I have
Lori.
to say, my friend, the baker.
I would like to place my order for a loaf on delivery of Sunday,
Yes.
please.
Yes, Jamie. Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Oh, I love it.
I see Charlene had asked about the YouTube channel. Is it just called Samuel's Library?
There's two ways of getting there. I put the link in the chat.
Okay.
Also, if you go to Samuel's Library website, it's up in the upper right-hand corner with the other social media.
Okay.
And it has a number of different presentations on the site. It's really nice to go there. So, and maybe Maggie makes an awesome soup also. Maybe we could do a soup presentation, because that's a great winter of how to maybe a whole thing on leftovers.
Right, because I did just, oh goodness. Yeah, I spent 2 hours or more taking the leftover ham and making ham and bean soup, which is funny because I'm vegetarian, so I don't eat it, but I have other people in the family that do. And then I also took beans, and at the same time I made vegetable soup.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I see a suggestion for Christmas cookies.
Yeah. Oh, well,
Yeah.
there.
Sharon, I
yes.
will also nominate the fact that she makes a phenomenal, hands down, I have never even bothered to try to reproduce the recipe, coffee cake.
Oh,
Oh.
I have the recipe.
I have the recipe. I tried one time. It did not even come close. I have never tried again.
Oh, I hear it. Yes, coffee
Yes, I
cake.
think coffee cake is being highly regarded.
Yes, that sounds fabulous.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've wanted to do a presentation on Christmas cookies, and December's already so busy. But what we need to do is next year we wanted to do a cookie Christmas cookie exchange where everybody got to put their, maybe send their recipe ahead of time, and then we could do an exchange as a presentation, and then even photograph people's cookies with their recipes.
I agree.
Great
So-
idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah, do a little bit of food photography. You know, look at how well Kathy's photography came out in this. Thank you.
I have to tell you, I just have to say to you guys, I don't know how you pulled that off. I am so impressed. This is so professional.
Yes.
I mean, it's just amazing.
All right, Lori, I'll give you a loaf of bread. Enough, okay?
Yes,
I know,
I
but no,
second
I
Lori's
mean-
comments. It was really, really excellent.
Yeah,
Very
it
much.
was.
Do I get bread too?
Yes, you're ready. You're almost ready for the food channel. Okay.
We'll have
But
to do a
I would be
throwdown.
happy to do the coffee cake, and maybe we can look in January or February as to the schedule and do this. It's a cinnamon coffee cake.
Yeah.
So,
And then
Pro-
there's the Valentine's Day cookie exchange.
There you go.
good.
I love it. You guys have got
Yeah.
all kinds of ideas.
Great.
Anyway,
Okay.
I really can't say enough about that presentation. I mean, I know
Thank you.
Sharon, you worked on that PowerPoint piece, but
Mhm.
the whole thing was just phenomenal. I mean,
Yes.
it was just phenomenal.
Thank you,
It was so
Sharon.
professional.
Well, thanks, everybody. Thank you, Maggie. This was great. And it would be nice to do a regular, different way of doing, just recipe exchanges. But you did a great job, and everything looked really, really good. So thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Yes.
Thank you, Sharon.